If you keep up with retro handhelds, you know just how much things have developed over the last 18 months. Products like the RG350 have shaken the industry, and there's seemingly a new device every other week. This can lead to buyer's remorse when the new devices have more features than yours has, but what if your device is upgradable? Some DIY projects have already toyed with this idea, but with 10 times more power in your smartphone than in the average retro handheld, are you better off just playing games on your phone? Many retro fans look down on smartphone gaming due to the lack of physical buttons, but the Razer Kishi looks to change all that. Is this the ultimate retro handheld?
The Razer Kishi is a new device, but what it does is nothing new. There have been different ways to pair a controller with your phone to play games, but so far all have had similar issues. They're either game controllers that you stuck your phone on top of, or fiddly little devices that you propped up your phone to use as a tiny TV. There have been other Switch-style controllers before, but most of them have required external batteries or had limited phone support. The Kishi tries and succeeds to support most Android-based phones with USB-C, sorry, iPhone users, but how well it works depends on your situation. To open up the Kishi, you pull both tabs and prop this back part open and slot in your phone. With phones getting taller and taller, it can look rather ridiculous with an ultra-wide screen on a handheld. For retro gaming, all this space is wasted since the majority of games will be 4x3, with a 5.5-inch screen having the same playable area as a 3.5-inch 4x3 screen. It's also not very phone case friendly, as even a rather thin case makes the Pixel 3a too big to fit inside. So if you are planning on using your main phone to play games, it's something to keep in mind. It does support down-firing speakers, but if your front-firing speakers are very near the edges, they may get covered, and top-firing speakers are completely covered. Things like the rear camera and fingerprint sensors could also be covered quite easily. The Kishi does have a pass-through for USB charging, though no data and headphones, but oddly it doesn't support fast charging even though the phone itself does, and more than likely will cover up your headphone jack if you happen to have one. Also, thanks to the two little tabs you use to split the controller apart, with the phone inside, the whole thing doesn't sit level, which is kind of annoying. But once you get it all set up, what's it like to play? It's alright. The face buttons are a little on the mushy side, but not too bad. The D-pad does have a lot of wiggle room in the slot and doesn't come off as very precise. L1 and R1 have a good feel to them, though L2 and R2 are throttle triggers, so normally not ideal for retro gaming. The joysticks are actually pretty nice and click for L3 and R3 and have great travel distance for a handheld, though I do wish they had a little more grip to them like on the RG350M. With a Moto G7 power installed, it's wider and thicker than Nintendo Switch, which has a much larger screen. It's twice the size as an RG350M, although it actually is slightly lighter thanks to it being made of plastic. It's not uncomfortable, but it does feel unnecessarily bulky. One thing to note is that the buttons follow an Xbox-style layout, which means that the joystick is front and center, and the A and B buttons are reversed from Nintendo consoles. Speed, screen size, battery life, etc. are all dictated by your phone. For me, I'm using a Motorola G7 Power, an entry-level phone from last year, since it should be indicative of what the kind of performance you can expect. And so how is that performance? In a word, great. The tagline, anything you can do, I can do better, comes to mind. GBA, 60 frames a second. SNES, 60 frames a second. PS1, 60 frames a second. 3DX, 60 frames a second. Using RetroArch, you can load up pretty much any console you want, and your phone will spit out good performance. Using other emulators like Drastic can also let you play Nintendo DS games, something the RG350 could never do, and an actual use for the wider screen. You can also upgrade the settings past the original consoles could do and take better advantage of the HD screen. It's definitely the most powerful retro handheld out there, even with a budget phone installed. There are several Android games that run well with this setup, though some aren't supported at all, like Call of Duty Mobile and PUBG, so don't expect it to work everywhere unless you want to map controls to touch controls using software. Battery life is negatively affected by having a controller plugged in as well, draining about 2% per hour just being plugged in. So is the Kishi the retro handheld to end all handhelds? Probably not. It's bulky, it doesn't support phones in cases, it doesn't allow for headphone use, you're still going to be using the touchscreen a lot, and at $80, if all you want to do is play PS1 and under retro games, there are better options available. That being said, if you don't want two devices and are looking to play newer games, this is pretty much the best way to do so until handhelds get more powerful. If you're like me and have a spare phone lying around, it makes a pretty good bedside setup. but if you're going to have two devices just to play retro games, you'd probably be better served by having a dedicated device.